You're listening to XVGM Radio. Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 47. Konami Unleashed in the East, Falsion Crisis Force Split EP episode with Dan Laughton.
It's going to be a really long episode name.
It is. Yeah, that's probably our longest to date, but I wanted to give it like a flashy name instead of just like Split EP, you know.
That's fair.
So today we are diving deep into two games that never came out in the United States, never came to Europe or any kind of PAL regions. These two games are exclusive to Japan.
Yes.
So that's hence the title Unleashed in the East.
Yep.
Yes.
Kind of a shame. Although I don't think we ever got the Famicom. I don't think we ever got the Disk System here in the United States.
No, we did not.
On top of that, so both of these games have things about them that they wouldn't be able to be played in America. So Falsion used the Famicom Disk System, which obviously we never got here in America, and then Crisis Force. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I think Dan, you were saying it was more than likely financial, but we just never got it. It was impressive.
Yeah, it was a pretty late release for the most part. Konami was jumping ship to the Super NES and the Sega Genesis and everything like that. So Crisis Force never made it overseas. There were a lot of games that Konami made that were exclusive to Japan, unfortunately. So, we're going to dive deep into both, talk a little bit about each game, a little bit of history, and some cool tidbits that you can learn about. But first, let's introduce our guest, our good friend Dan Laughton, who is not only a Patreon member, but also a longtime supporter of XVGM. So, Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
For sure. Yeah, we're honored and grateful for your presence here in the episode. So, we wanted to bring you on because you actually have a little bit of experience with shooters, but also your background is in physics, and you even wrote a book, which you can tell everybody about real quick if you want, and kind of share a little bit about the book.
Yeah, sure, why not? I wrote the physics of video games. This is, my goodness, I think like 6-7 years now. It seems like it was just yesterday, and it almost doesn't feel like it was real. But it's something where it was kind of an experiment that extended off of work that I was doing in school, because I thought about using physics and video games as a teaching tool. So I decided to expand that into, rather than just lesson plans, let's think about how can we use physics in these video games to be able to think about some tangible real world situation where these things can actually work. Like, can Kirby actually exist? Can Samus's space jump actually do its thing? So it was a lot of fun being able to go through these things and thinking about it from the perspective of not what you can't do, but what you possibly can do if you really think creatively enough. So it was an absolute delight, and I wound up going through a great deal of games while I was going through that book. So it was a lot of fun to write, and I'm still getting people talking about it, so I couldn't be any happier about the way that it went.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
I will say that Samus's ball thing is a real thing, and it's super hot. So,
Well, I think he was talking about the space jump.
no, I mean, like, it could happen. Like,
Somebody
Yeah, it absolutely could happen.
yeah,
curling down to
I don't know if it's hot, but yeah, it could happen.
it's so hot. Listen, when she does the ball thing, that's when you know.
I feel like we might have to cut that joke.
Not at all. Not at all. Where's your mind, Justin?
Right where it should be, on the back porch.
In the gutter. Oh boy. So we just came in with a track from Falsion. We're going to be playing Falsion first, and then we'll jump into Crisis Force. So this song that we came in on is Stage 1 from Falsion. This game came out in 1987. So, you know, pretty much like in the middle of the Famicom Disk System's run. Both of these games are shooters. You played through both of these games, Dan, in speediness because you are a big fan of speed running. So what can you tell me about your experience with Falsion as a shmup or a shooter or a shooty fan?
It's quite a competent little Rudy Tooty point and shooty, especially when you give in thinking about the time frame that it was released and the technological component, being able to have something where you have this 3D on-rails shooter going into the screen and being able to shoot enemies like that, almost kind of thinking like a Top Gun style, it was really neat, and I was surprised how well it actually played. Sometimes it can be a little bit weird with the depth perception to be able to know whether you're going to get hit by something or not, or being able to stay on target, but generally it was quite a fun little game, and something that I would highly recommend that people just try out, especially if they're a fan of the genre.
For sure. The best way to compare it is if you've ever played Space Harrier or I think it's called Adventures in 3D World, or any game like that where like you're behind the character and the character is running towards like forward,
like away from
facing,
the screen,
like away from the screen, right? So that is kind of how it goes. Almost like a precursor in a way to Star Fox, like a Star Fox Lite.
Yeah.
And a mega precursor to the amazingness that is Rez.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
One of my favorite games. You just found the secret word.
That's your safe word?
I couldn't.
Not safe word.
That's your...
The Pee Wee Herman. The word. What is it? Word of the day. Secret word.
I like the idea of your safe word being...
No, it's not Rez.
Yeah. Rez!
Jeez.
Awesome.
Sorry, you were saying, Dan.
Yeah.
What was I saying?
I think you were going to talk about Rez.
Oh, was I?
So this game's soundtrack was composed by 3 different composers: Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takenouchi, and Atsushi Fujio. So we'll dive into them a little bit later throughout the episode. What did you think of the song, Justin?
So the opening track that we came in on, Stage 1, is very catchy. I found myself listening to a lot of the tracks in both of these games because there's just a lot of good music in general. But this is the one that really got stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Like, out of everything that we picked, there's some really good stuff and some stuff that I really like. Whether or not I like this song, whether or not I liked this song, it is an earworm and it got stuck in my head. To be fair though, I did like this song. It wasn't one of my main picks because it felt. I don't know, it felt different than the rest of the game. This one almost felt a little bit poppy.
Yeah.
And not that that's bad. It's not usually what I go for.
I can agree with that. I think that this song has more of that classic NES Konami sound. It doesn't have some of the features that the rest of the Falsion tracks have, and it doesn't even sound like Crisis Force 2, which came out, a few years later. So it's one of those songs that has its own identity and doesn't really sound like anything else, because most of the other parts of the soundtrack, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's almost got like a sawtooth bass thing going on with the wavetable, and there's a reason for that, so we'll get into that in a bit. But what about you, Dan? What do you think of this track?
I thought it was a really good one because it does have this little light-hearted feel, and I think it's a warm way to be able to kind of get you into the game and start things off, but it certainly does feel out of place when you think about the entire soundtrack as a whole. So it's definitely not my favorite either, but I still do enjoy it because it does have some elements, like some of the drumming in there, and a couple of those bridges are kind of nice to listen to and have a little catchy rhythm to them.
Yeah, those classic like Konami flourishes, if you will. Cool.
Yeah.
So
little showy here and there.
Yeah. All right, so our next track is my first pick from Falsion. Again, this is our Famicom Disk System game that came out in 1987. This song is Boss Theme, and it definitely highlights some of the things that we're going to be talking about throughout this this portion of the episode. Hey, welcome back. That was my first pick from the Falsion soundtrack. That was Boss Theme, and again, composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio. What do you think of this one?
This one's really cool. I liked it. It was hopping and bopping and moving and grooving in a few ways. But no, I think my favorite part of this is actually that like sawtooth sound that's in there.
Yeah. That's my favorite part too. Yeah.
It's really neat. Like it stands out, as I'm sure it's supposed to, but out of the rest of the song, like the drums in it are pretty cool, and the melody is there to follow. But I don't know, like that part stands out so much. I feel like it was meant to be like the part of the song to grab you.
This is like a quintessential Boss theme for me.
Yeah.
Because it has those evil notes. It sounds truly evil. Like you are about to face the motherload of bosses, even though it's just a regular Boss theme. In fact, it might even be better than the last Boss theme. I got to double check, but it's a really good song. This is one of my favorites off of this soundtrack. It's just really crunchy. I love as you said, the sawtooth kind of sound to it for the wavetable. It's almost like a guitar coming in to play like an electric guitar coming in to like da-da-da-da-da-da, and then do like the slide down the neck. It's pretty cool. So, Dan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I particularly like the build-up in this track. There's something about it that really starts getting your attention and has you kind of getting a little bit more tense. And particularly when you think about it in terms of the gameplay, I think it really sets the tone for like, this is going down anytime now.
Yeah.
And then I really like the way that it continues to just have these drops and then swings back up. Like it really has that kind of wave to it. And I really enjoy when songs kind of drop up and down like that in terms of the tones. I think it works really well in terms of building the tension and really just kind of getting you in the moment.
Very well put.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. This game, Falsion, we already talked a little bit about it. It's a 3D Space Harrier style game, and what's really cool about it is that they actually use a peripheral that came out for the Famicom called the Famicom 3D System, which is pretty neat. It is exclusive to Japan, came out in 1987, so it's perfect timing because this game also came out in 1987. In fact, what's interesting about this is the game Falsion and this device both came out on the same day, October 21st. Yeah. So I'm assuming that it came out, probably they built Falsion with the intention of releasing it with the Famicom 3D system. So the way it works, if you've ever seen like the Master System's Sega Scope 3D glasses, it's very similar to that. It's a headset that you put on, and the system has like these active shutter glasses with an adapter that you connect to the third player expansion port on the Famicom, and the glasses are connected to the system via the 3.5 millimeter like jacks in it. And what this does is displays like a stereoscopic 3D image, again very similar to the Master System. Games would play normal in 2D, but you would have to activate the 3D mode. Now if you go into the settings on the game, there is a 3D setting that is available for it.
Right.
I think it's like a mode that you can choose so that the whole game is automatically 3D. Otherwise, you can just hit the select button and that'll activate it on the games that use it. So pretty nifty. There was also one developed for the Sharp Twin Famicom. It was, I guess, a twin Famicom 3D system because, of course, you couldn't use the Famicom 3D system with the Sharp Twin.
Right.
So I guess they developed a separate twin Famicom 3D system. I only have the Sharp Twin, so I'd be curious to see this twin Famicom 3D system. I bet it costs a fortune online.
Probably.
Yeah. But yeah, this is kind of like Nintendo's precursor to Virtual Boy in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even realize that there was 3D anything for the NES. I mean, I think I remember hearing about like a game that used like the cheesy 3D glasses.
Yeah.
Like the red and blue thing.
Right. That was probably 3D World Runner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was released on the NES.
I did not know that there was like a whole 3D system expansion thing. Obviously, it never came out here, so not like we were ever gonna know about it.
Just blew your mind.
Did.
Yes.
Let's move into my next track here. I am going to play y'all a track called Stage 2. This is from Falsion, which we're currently talking about. It came out in 1987 on the Famicom Disk System. Welcome back. That was Falsion's Stage 2.
Yeah, nicely put.
Yeah, very brief. Not a whole lot to explain there. The song that plays during the second stage of the game.
Really?
Best I can imagine.
Wow. That I've
not
heard,
played this game,
I've
so
heard,
I have to extrapolate.
I've heard that's also called level 2.
See, if it was called level 2, they would have called it level 2.
That's
they called
true.
it Stage 2.
That's true.
We are clearly padding this.
Yes. Yes. So, what do you think about that one?
Well, I mean, I picked it, so
Right.
I picked it because I like a lot of the stuff that they were doing in like the lower ranges. Again, talking about the sawtooth sound that's in there, and going back to what you were saying in the last track, you called it crunchy, which is a word that I like to use for a lot of this stuff, because it's really what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's specifically the sawtooth sound that's crunchy, or if it's the way that they're using like the audio channels or whatnot, but I mean, it makes me like it, so that's all I know.
So the Famicom Disk System audio has a channel in it that is like an additional channel that is not part of the Famicom, of course, because that's, it's part of the Disk System add-on. And it's generated by a chip called the 2C33 chip. It's part of the RAM card. What it does is it outputs through the Famicom's cart edge connectors expansion audio pins. And this information comes to us courtesy of NES Dev's wiki page.
Nice.
What this does, according to this website, is it allows the channel to rapidly repeat the wavetable setup by the CPU in a manner similar to channel 3 of the Game Boy. So we're talking about sawtooth bass. That's what we're kind of referencing in a way. It's not exactly sawtooth, but it has that kind of sound based on it. So it's more like a modulation that's a bit more sophisticated. Yeah.
Neat. Speaking of bass, was it just me, or was there some galloping bass going on there?
I don't think so.
No?
No. Maybe. I felt like it was less gallop. To me, the gallop would be like
Okay.
That would be gallop to me. That's like, your standard like Iron Maiden gallop. This,
More like a trot?
yeah, I would say it's more like a trot. Yes. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Dan, what are your thoughts on this one?
The biggest part that stood out for me were those high solos that you get towards the end of the first loop of the track. There's something about them that just really grabbed me because I think it works as a really nice effective contrast to those bass notes, because a lot of it is a really lower song. So to be able to have that, to be able to sort of contrast what it is that you're hearing before, it's a nice way to be able to break up the song and make it a little bit more interesting. So I know that that's what stood out the most for me.
Yeah, no, those were really cool. And I will say that I like how this sounds like Konami, but doesn't sound like a specific Konami game. Like,
Right, like it doesn't sound like Gradius.
right, it doesn't sound like Castlevania. It doesn't sound like Turtles. It has its own sound style, and yet it still remains Konami-ish.
Yeah, like it's very, very much rooted in the Konami sound font.
Yeah, especially those drums. The drums are like a dead giveaway that it's a Konami song. If you played this for me otherwise, I would have been like, who made this?
Yeah, when I was initially asked to be on the episode, I actually, before I even looked into what the games were, I listened to both of the soundtracks, not knowing who released them, and I was like, these definitely have to be Konami games.
Yeah.
Like, there was no way they weren't.
100%, yep.
Yeah. Regarding the game's physics, Dan, what would you say comes to mind regarding like the flying ships, the levels, the bosses? What stands out to you, or what can you kind of retch from your book to kind of bring us to this episode?
I think one of the more fun things, I did a similar sort of theme with the name is escaping me. It's a treasure shoot 'em up. I know it's on PS2, and it's got a really cool shiny cover on it and everything like that. And of course, I'm not going to remember it on the spot now. I'm sure I'll remember it after we're done recording.
Sure.
But it was something where I really liked the concept of thinking about shield and energy being used as a means to be able to shoot things and to also take damage in a sense, because have this ability to be able to think about things in a slightly different perspective when it's just like when we're thinking about lasers or like these bombs going through space, those things can't actually really happen. But when we think about it from a perspective of can these actually be these highly concentrated waves, and you have this technology where we can take all of this and almost make like a laser type function and shoot laser beams that really have this high amount of energy concentrated in a giant blob. And that was one of the most fun things to think about when going through the book and thinking about how shoot-em-ups work, and that was with Sylphid. I knew I'd remember it at some point.
Oh yes, yeah. That was the second. That was Working Designs, wasn't it? Wasn't that one of their games? Yeah. Because as soon as you said shiny covers, I was like, it's got to be Working Designs. Like nobody else does those. So
yeah. So you were saying like things like bombs and lasers and whatnot don't work in space. I think I understand the concept of why bombs don't work in space, but I'm confused about the laser thing.
Well, in terms of when you're thinking of them in the way that they would actually be able to do any sort of physical damage or anything like that, because if you're just thinking about light traveling through space, like the reason we aren't getting bombarded and hurt right now is because light can travel, but it doesn't interact with us in a way that's going to damage us, other than like we could get sunburned or something like that. But when you think about lasers in the sense of being able to take down another ship, there has to be a little bit more to it. Like there has to be something where the energy is concentrated into something that's a lot more almost solid in a sense. So there needs to be some type of propelling mechanism or some type of containment system or something to that effect to be able to make it so that you have this thing that replicates what a laser could do, but at the same time also has something to kind of contain it, because light will just sort of do whatever it wants and can't really be contained if it's just let out doing its own thing.
Cool.
Huh. Okay. Well, I learned something today. Yeah. Speaking of learning, let's talk about the composer, or one of three composers, Shinya Sakamoto.
All right. So Shinya Sakamoto started out doing music on a Famicom game called Stinger in 1986.
It's another shooter.
It's another Konami. And it was very busy in the 80s. Did King Kong 2, Ikari no Megaton Punch in 1986, Russian Attack in 87, Meikujin Dababa in 87, Life Force, Falsion, Snatcher in 1988, Risa no Yosei Densetsu in 88, Konami YY World in 88, which we've talked about before. Just bouncing up to their last couple of things. Quarth in 1990 and Nemesis in 1990. They did sound effects and sound design.
Don't forget Blades of Steel
in 88. Yeah, that was the last thing that they actually did music on. And their last non-uncredited credit is Ganbare Goemon, Kuru Nara Koi, Ayashi Geika no Kuroi Kage, which is a PlayStation game that came out in 1998.
Goodness. All right, then. Okay, so let's move into my next pick. That is going to be Falsion's Stage 4, again by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takenouchi, and Atsushi Fujio. Hey, you're back, and that was Falsion's Stage 4 track, and that was by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio. What do you think of this one, Dan?
I think the biggest thing for me that stands out are the balance between those long sustained notes and then that frantic pace that just going right over it. That balancing between the two of them is really cool. And sometimes it's like, okay, let's just go totally frantic, and then for a while let's just kind of slow things out a bit and just hold this note for a little while, and then we're back to frantic. Like that balancing back and forth was a lot of fun and makes this such a pleasure to be able to listen to.
This is very similar to Stage 1 in my mindset.
Really?
In the sense that, while Stage 1 is definitely a lot more like poppy sounding, this kind of had that same tone minus the wavetable kind of, sawtooth thing that we've been talking about. And on top of that, it's very noodly. I mean, you've got the up and down melodies kind of going up and down the fretboard. So I totally pictured just like a piano or a guitar, just so that was what I heard.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would agree with both of the sentiments here. There's two things that I get out of this. The first is this feels to me, I mean, without listening to anything else from the soundtrack, this feels to me almost like an end level. Like it feels very much like you're soaring, you're flying,
yeah.
And you're just like you are so close to the end, and like it's right over there, and you just need to go beat that guy.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Stage 4 is not the last stage, so like I know that it's not, but it's just the feeling that this track gives to me is that. The other thing that I get from this track is the arpeggios that are going on there. I don't want to say they feel very Final Fantasy, because it is not the Final Fantasy prelude arpeggio.
I think it's if you sped it up.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, like, it feels sort of like it's sped up. I know that melody well enough to know that it's not the same thing.
Sure.
But it definitely has that same feel to it, and it just, so, like, it brings this feeling of, like, almost at the end, and also, like, Final Fantasy, and it's very bright and very happy, and I really do like this track.
Hey, I think if you did slow this Falsion track down, though, it would be a Final Fantasy track,
I see what you're saying.
Once the verse comes in, the da 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 da.
Yeah.
Like if you slowed that down, it'd be like da 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 da. Like it's very like
be that castle theme.
A castle theme, town theme. Yeah, for sure.
I can see that.
Yeah. So this composer only did 3 games: Shigehiro Takanouchi, Nemesis 2, which is Gradius 2,
right?
Famicom exclusive. Metal Gear in 1987. They did sub sound effects, and Falsion. That's it.
They were only active in 1987.
That is correct. Yeah, 1 year higher. This game's plot for Falsion. Let's talk a little bit about.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked about that.
We have not. Yeah, it takes place in the 22nd century, and essentially what has happened is the moon is no longer able to be like habitable, which I guess that means that they did inhabit
at some point,
it.
Yeah, I was going to say that,
and now it's not. There's a space colony that was established on Pluto's Lagrange point. Interestingly enough, Konami did another game called Lagrange Point. So I'm wondering, do these two tie in together?
Probably not, but maybe.
In classical mechanics, Lagrangian mechanics and Lagrangian points are like the most boring freaking thing. So like.
So anyways, the aliens from a far away part of the universe have decided that they are going to invade and take over. So this colony is kind of feeling, the aliens come down on them, and there's a huge ship called the Gigantos, which basically shows up and takes over. So didn't completely conquer the Plutonian colony. It just kind of like inhabited it, but didn't fully conquer it. But then they went down to Earth. I guess the U.S. Space Force, which was a thing. Apparently,
it is now.
Apparently, it's a thing in the future as well, the real future. They created this thing called the Hyperzone Drive, which I guess is part of the ship, which is called the Falsion. So you're playing as a ship called the Falsion, but you're piloting it. You're like an unnamed pilot. So you are the last hope of the human race to destroy the aliens. So you've got a beam weapon, you've got homing missiles. There's 6 stages in this game. That's it.
Good to know.
Yeah. So it's there's not much there. I mean, it's your It's your basic, hey, there's aliens, blow them up plot. So, from what I understand, the game
Doesn't
runs...
need to get more complicated than that.
Yeah,
I guess...
keep it simple.
I guess not, yeah. From what I understand, the game runs kind of choppy. I think Dan is the only one that's actually played this one, so you'd have to confirm that, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's really choppy and a lot of flickering. It doesn't run particularly well. Still very fun, though.
Yeah. Do you think that's because of the 3D that they kind of interjected, even if you're not playing with the 3D on?
There is a chance that it could be, but it could also be like some of the Kunio-kun games. Like if you're playing Super Dodgeball, that game is like nearly impossible to keep track of your sprites because there's just so much going on and everything is fading in and out all of the time. You're like doing guesswork as to where everything is. So you're almost kind of like playing the game, but also having to like calculate in advance where I think this missile's going to go.
A lot of the SAS Cicada developed Data East games had that problem as well. Stuff like Bad Dudes and other games like that. So yeah, a very similar problem. A lot of sprite flickering. So yeah,
it's twice in one episode so far. You have you have sparked games that I'm very much a fan of. First was Rez, now Super Dodgeball. You got a list over there? You're just going down?
Oh yeah, I was going through your profile on the XVGM site. I didn't know who you were before this, so I just started looking into it now.
Excellent.
Nice.
All is going exactly as planned.
I gotta look into who Mike is too now.
Nah,
he's not important.
Nah, no, definitely not. So let's move on to our next
my
track.
next pick.
Yeah. What do you got?
So this is going to be Falsion's Last Boss track. It's called Last Boss, and based on your description, I'm assuming this is the Gigantos boss.
Possibly.
Hey, welcome back. That was The Last Boss, or just Last Boss, from Falsion, the Famicom Disk System game that we're talking about from 1987.
You know what this was missing?
Galpin Base.
Sawtooth base.
Sawtooth Base. I was close.
Yeah, or, the wavetable stuff that we've been talking about throughout the episode.
Yeah.
It's severely lacking here, and that kind of bums me out because this is such a like metal track. I mean, you've got the double bass that's going and I feel like if they added in that wavetable bass, kind of give it like an extra crunch, it would really kind of send this track over the moon for me. But
kick it up a notch.
I
was getting more of a, like we were just talking about Final Fantasy and JRPGs, I was getting kind of a JRPG boss battle vibe out of this.
Okay.
There's a lot of music in this game that feels like it is very multi-purpose, like you could transpose it into other games, and I'm sure it works really well in Falsion. Dan, again, you being the person who's played it, you can confirm or deny whether or not the music fits when you're playing.
It does work well, but I definitely echo the same sentiment where there needs to be a little bit more in the track. Like, I wish that there was a little bit more of a contrast in there. Like, it doesn't feel like a full enough rounded track. Like, I think if there was a little bit more of the bass and a couple more high tones here and there, I think it could have really taken this to a whole other level. Like, overall it works, and I think it fits the particular theme, but it just needed a little bit more. And especially when you start hearing those elements, like, it is a very metal track. Like, I could totally see somebody covering this, like even just those kind of like that double bass, that kicker right there. Yeah, like that's perfect, but it just needs a little bit more to just keep it going.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just kind of want this track to be better. It's not a bad track, it's just it could have been so much more.
That's fair.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that fits in the tone with the game itself, because the game is not a bad game. It's an entertaining and enjoyable game for what it is. Dan, you were saying when we were talking about it before that it's a short game.
Yeah, you can beat it quite quickly, and I'm not sure like how it works in terms of difficulty. I'm not an effective gauge for difficulty in shoot 'em up games.
Right.
I fly through them too quickly, but it didn't feel particularly difficult, so I would say that most people are going to be able to get it through in a quicker playthrough.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think it's worth investing too much time in being like perfect at it anyway, so I think that's for the better.
Yeah.
Like it's competent and it works, but it's not like let's replay this every year kind of thing. Like with you with Mega Man 3 kind of thing, where you're really like, I gotta keep playing this, like it's so good. Like it's good if you're just like, I got 20 minutes to kill kind of thing.
Right.
And then you get to where you get to.
There's a lot of games I have for the NES that are like that, like RoboCop or Karate Kid. Games that I could just fly through in like 20 minutes that I've been playing since I was a kid. So it's a shame that this never came out. I mean, they didn't even try to convert it, obviously, to the NES. And, I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of glad they didn't in a way, because it wouldn't have been able to handle that lack of the expanded audio.
Yeah.
And, whereas like things like Castlevania 3, they were able to convert it so that it didn't need that expanded audio. Sure, the expanded audio is phenomenal in Akamajo Densetsu, but I feel like if they tried to convert this one over, because it would be automatically lacking that extra like I mean, they could have put it in as like a regular lead line, but it would have just kind of flopped.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been the same.
It wouldn't. It would have sounded too similar, and that's I think the issue with some of those wavetable samples. So yeah.
Particularly when you think about the time frame where this was released, this was when they were really in the early years of understanding how all of this stuff worked. Whereas when you think about the Castlevania 3 soundtrack, where that's much later in the life cycle, and they really understood the chips a lot better. They understood how to port things better. Like there was a lot more knowledge in the field, whereas this was very early in things. So I don't think it would have ported very well.
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in there, and the reason I say that is because of Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. So when that was released on the Famicom Disk System, I think it was probably around the same time, like 87, 88, because the game came out in the US, I believe, in 88. So that means that this came out, it had to have been 87 or really early 88 for Simon's Quest to come out in Japan. It came out for the Famicom Disk System, and it had a save feature built into it, but the most important thing is that the music was totally different. Like totally different in the sense that it sounded very weak, very just like it paled in comparison to the US release. When you listen to it, it's a lot more like the notes don't sound as good. It sounds nothing like this even. It's interesting, but when you listen to the Famicom Disk System soundtrack version and then you listen to the US version, they are like night and day in terms of quality. The NES version blows it out of the water. So at least for me personally, I am not a fan of the Famicom Disk System version of it. So I gotta wonder if they'd be able to maybe do something with this. I don't know. It's up for debate, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when back on Pixeltunes Radio, when you guys did the Castlevania 3 versus Akamaju Densetsu, there were some tracks where, I mean, Akamaju was clearly the winner, and then there were some tracks where it was surprising that the NES version, which had less channels and whatever else, just sounded better.
Yeah,
because it either wasn't as muddy or it wasn't as busy. So I mean, there's something to be said for that, but I don't know. Like I agree with what you both were saying earlier with like lacking the sawtooth bass stuff. It just, I don't think that it would sound as good. I think they could probably do it justice, but I don't think it would sound. I just don't think it would sound as good.
And to clarify, I know we're saying sawtooth bass and that's wrong. I have no other way to explain it because, again, we talked a little bit about it earlier. It's referencing the Game Boy,
right?
You know, the sound that is kind of emulating. So we know it's not technically sawtooth bass. It just sounds like it. Like boot up Castlevania Belmont's Revenge, and you'll hear what we're talking about there.
Yeah. So Atsushi Fujio is our final composer on this game here, and they started out doing sound design on Majo Densetsu 2 Taimashikyo Gallius in 1987, and then went on to do Life Force, Falsion, a lot of the same Konami games that we spoke about earlier. So just to jump to some of the more recent stuff that wasn't covered in either of the other composers, they did Twin Bee 3, Poco Poco Daimo in 1989, Contra 3, The Alien Wars in 1992, Axelay in 1992, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters in 93. They did sound programming. The final game that they did music on was Survival Kids in 1999.
Cool. Well, it looks like we are getting a call on our requests hotline. I did not expect this.
No, not
well, then again, we usually
guest.
don't. Yeah, usually, especially when we have a guest like this. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and take the call. Caller, you are on the air. What can we do for you?
Hey, guys, it's me. And me. My name's Mike, and I'm Justin. And we used to be from XVGM Radio, but then something happened.
Wait, are you saying we're calling ourselves?
That's impossible.
Literally.
Nah, dude, like, listen, so something happened when you did this episode, bro. And what it is, I don't know, but it's linked to the next track. You gotta play Stage 6 from Falsion, dude. Don't play anything else.
No, don't play what you think you need to play. It's not right.
Okay, so here's my question. Why do you sound like you're from California?
It's what happens in the future, bro.
Dude, everybody's from California now.
We're all from California.
Everybody just gets shifted over to California. It's weird, bro.
Dude, you think California's gonna drop off into the ocean? It's the other way around. Dude, know that.
There's lasers. Kittens are hurt. Just play the track, man.
Alright.
Yeah. Sure.
Next track from what we're gonna play to avoid world conquering domination and everyone becoming like a California person is Stage 6 from Falsion, the 1987 Famicom Disk System exclusive, composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio.
You're listening to XVGM Radio.
Okay, well, that was Stage 6 from the game that we are talking about today on our split EP episode, Falsion. This was a Famicom Disk System release that came out in 1987, exclusive to the Famicom Disk System. Composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio. Those names get easier and easier to say when you repeat them
Yes.
frequently. All right, I'm going with Dan on this one. What are your thoughts?
This was the track that I was looking forward to the most this episode. I'm glad that those California dudes kind of interrupted and brought that track in, because everything that I liked about the previous songs, I feel like they put together in this one song. Like the drums are great. I feel like they had those high and low tones and they bounced back and forth between the two of them. They had their little solos, like the bass sounded better, like the highs sounded better, like everything that I wanted in the previous tracks, where it's like, this is good, but I want this. This is good, but I want this. They put it all into this one.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that when we played Stage 4, I was like, this feels like an ending theme track. And now that I've heard Stage 6, I think this actually is the last stage, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Sounds more like a last boss track, though.
That's what I was going to say. This feels kind of like a last stage into the last boss to me.
Yeah.
So, like, Stage 4 feels, like, very uplifting and like, hey, you're almost at the end.
Credits.
Everything else.
Almost sounds like credits.
Yeah,
to
I
me.
was going to say, like, compared to this, Stage 4 almost sounds like credits now.
Yeah.
The stage, it's so bright that it just feels like the end, and this feels like the climax.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of take back my final stage comment from earlier.
Right.
And, like, this is appropriate. I like this.
Yeah, Stage 4 is way more like credits. This
I feel like there's a part of it where it's kind of coming around the bend to the end. That's how I felt like Stage 4 was. Not quite there, but getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that too. This song was really good. I was loving the fact that it kind of had that sawtooth bass kind of chirping in throughout the song, where like you'd have the highs like da-na-na-na-na-na-na, and then you get like a really low like da-da-da-da, da-na-na-na-na-na-da-da-da. That was really cool. That set my ears on fire. Like when I heard it, it definitely sparked my interest, got me more invested in the song. I just really love that sound. It's just so grimy and tough sounding.
It kind of reminds me of TMNT.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Maybe like Radical Rescue, like TMNT 3 Radical Rescue on the Game Boy. That's got a great soundtrack. So, no complaints here. But graphically speaking on this game, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like the sprites look great, but the backgrounds are mostly space. Like some of them are just space, and then like there's one level that's like a sea. Where like you're flying through the air and you're going over the sea. And then there's other stages that just look like lines, like green lines, like thick green textureless lines.
Yeah.
Those just bug me.
And then they're just sort of like blocks and stuff like that, where it's like, why is that even there?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that has something to do with the 3D, because we're obviously looking at it from a 2D perspective. So maybe with those 3D glasses, it just melts your brain, when you're like watching it,
Maybe. I feel like that would be a huge jump, though, because if the game is supposed to be playable in either 2D or 3D with the appropriate equipment, the main experiential difference should be the fact that you're seeing things differently. It shouldn't be like, oh, this looks like crap, and oh, this looks so much better now that I've paid thousands of dollars for all this extra stuff.
So the game has a couple other quick things that we can talk about, since we already talked about the 3D glasses. When you beat the game, it's got some fun English at the end. Where it says, third target overcome, feel like to have a cup of coffee.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Feel like to have a cup of coffee sometimes.
Feel like, sometimes feel like to have a cup of coffee. The ship in the game Gradius Gaiden, that's called the Falsion Beta ship. That's Falsion, Falchion. That ship is based off of the Falsion ship from this game. So now we are going to take a call, because we are getting a call on the Patreon
2 in a row.
hotline. Well, this is a Patreon hotline request, which I was not expecting, because
We weren't expecting any.
right.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and listen to our next request. Caller, you are on the air. What can we play for you?
finally, I was able to get through. I can't believe I'm the 9th caller through. I've tried day after day, week after week, month after month to finally get a track in. And so I'm going to have to put it out there, and I really want you to play It's Raining Men. I love that song.
Sorry, I think you called into the wrong radio station. This is XVGM Radio.
Yeah, he must be looking for like VG Embassy or something like that. Yeah, I think that's what he's looking for.
Gotcha.
Oh, this is Justin and Mike from XVGM. Okay, how about instead we look at something a little bit different and probably on the theme that you guys are talking about. And let's talk about Stage 4 World of Fire from Crisis Force. I can't put into words how much I love this song, and I hope you and your listeners do as well, because it is an absolute banger, particularly those drums.
All right, well, let's go ahead and play that track. Thank you, caller, for calling in. That I believe was Dan Laughton.
Yeah.
Who's one of our patrons.
It's good to hear from him.
Yeah, we haven't heard from him in a while, so.
Pretty annoying, though. That's good.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and hear the track from Crisis Force. This came out on the Famicom in 1991. This is Stage 4, and it's by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma. Hey everybody, it's that time again to save money. I'm Bill Lyrium, and I've gone intergalactic. I'm no longer just renting out go-karts anymore. Now I've moved on to spaceships, and you're in luck because we're having the sale of a flight time. There's no black holes involved whatsoever. It's just you, me, and some savings. We specialize in the Konami line of interstellar space vehicles equipped with the finest weaponry, from the Aura Wing to the Falsion ship. Or if you're looking for a classic ride, Vic Viper's got you covered. But wait, we also have options that can be added for a limited time. Purchase before 20XX for more details. Not finding the ride of your life? Looking for something more family friendly? How about Twinbee, a classic that will let you literally have fun in the sun? Come on down and mention how much this ad annoys you for an extra 10% off. That's right, we're giving you money if you hate us. Remember, I'm Bill Lyrium. I'm the dealer for the people.
Hello and welcome back. That was Stage 4 from Crisis Force, released in 1991, requested by Dan Laughton, whoever he is.
Yeah.
And it's composed by some people that I can't pronounce, so I think one of you will have to take over.
Yeah, the composers on this were Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma.
Yes, that was really good.
That was intense.
Yeah, that was good stuff. So I wonder why Dan picked this track.
We may never know.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Dan,
What do you think?
What do you think of this one?
I think it's probably my favorite track from this whole thing. Like the whole soundtrack is really good, but there's something about this one, particularly that solo towards the end. Like I am completely obsessed with that piece of the song. Like it's one of the things that I actually have humming through my head now and then, and even coming in to this episode, that was the one thing that was running through my head, was that drop down solo thing where I was like, oh yes, I get to hear this again. I'm so here for this.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really addictive. And one thing I want to note about this is it sounds much tighter musically than the Falsion soundtrack, which was good, for sure. But this obviously shows the strengths of what they've learned over the years with the Famicom sound chip and what they were able to get out of it. The tones and the melodies are just so much more rich, but at the same time, there's a lot more low end on them as well. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, this song had a lot of, I don't want to say everything, because I mean, obviously didn't have everything, but musically or tonally, there was a really good mix of like the high and the low. Like you were saying, the lows are a lot more pronounced and a lot more brought out. I mean, you don't have that sawtooth. It may not have that because it doesn't have access to that sound channel,
right?
But it doesn't need it.
It doesn't. No,
it doesn't feel like this is lacking. And I mean, sure, maybe if they added it, it would sound cool, but it would feel tacked on to me.
I agree, but I also want to state that I feel like that thing in Falsion with the sawtooth sound kind of almost felt like a spice. Like a spice you would kind of sprinkle on, some food. You know what it is? It is the verde sauce on your Taco Bell experience.
Okay.
So, Stage 4 in Crisis Force, I think... So, I have played this game. I will say that.
You own this, right?
I own this. Yeah, I own the Famicom cart. And I own the manual, too.
Ooh.
Yeah, fancy. So, it's... I got it before it jumped in price, because I think now it's like $160 game, like loose.
Wow.
I got it for, let's say, about $80. And that's with the manual, so I got a pretty good deal on it. But it's one of those games I sat down and played when I first got it, and I was blown away at the visuals, specifically the visuals. There is a ton of parallax scrolling in this game.
Oh yeah, I heard this is very, very big on the parallax scrolling.
It's borderline insane how much parallax scrolling is going on in this game. It's kind of mind-blowing. There's this one...
I also feel like it works well in terms of being able to have that visual component, but it doesn't make it so that it's like too showy that it's obnoxious. Like I feel like it's just the right amount that it's just really impressive to look at and play.
Right. No, I agree. But I will say that it does kind of make the game chug a little bit as far as the frame rate.
Yes.
It does make the frame rate dip. So, not every game can be Rekka.
I was gonna say it's no Jim Powers, but at the same time it's not Jim Powers.
Right. Well, I was gonna say Rekka comes to mind as being one of the most playable shooters on the Famicom. That game runs at an insane frame rate for the Famicom, but also graphically speaking, it's nowhere near as impressive, in my opinion, as Crisis Force is.
Right.
Especially with all that parallax scrolling. So, but it is a top-down shooter.
Vertically scrolling.
Right. So we'll talk a little bit more about Crisis Force throughout the breaks, as well as the composers in the entire game. But I figure we would jump into your first pick. Justin, what do you got for us?
So my first Crisis Force pick is going to be stages 1 and 6. This is one track that encompasses both stages.
Cool.
back to XVGM Radio. That was Stages 1 and 6 from Crisis Force, the game that we are now talking about in the second half of this episode, the Famicom-released 1991 game by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma.
You got it. What did you think of this one?
It was very frantic. I liked it a lot. The one thing, there's a lot of stuff that I like about it, but the one thing that I would pull out here is towards the beginning of the track, there's the just really cool, it's basically a slide, but it sounds like an 8-bit version of like sliding on the fretboard of a guitar. Like it has the way that it changes between notes. I don't know. To me, it just feels very much like a guitar slide and then translated into 8-bit.
Okay, I could see that. I love the energy of this track. It's just so vibrant and so fun, but at the same time, it's got not militant sounding, but like it has like it's got an importance to it, this song, and it makes me feel a little anxious and at the same time like a little excited. So it's got just such energy and such force behind it that I really don't have anything to compare it with. It just kind of stands on its own, but at the same time, like, again, when I think of Konami and what a Konami song sounds like, this is it. I mean, between those absolutely stellar drums with like really awesome like tom rolls and the killer double bass, just the drums sound tight here, the melodies sound crisp. It's just all around a fantastic song.
Agreed. I also just want to point out the bass line that runs through this is very driving and very crunchy too.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to just sort of the rhythm section, it's got a lot of that crunch that I like.
Yeah.
Dan?
I would agree with all of that, and I think that one of the highlights throughout this entire soundtrack are the drums. There's something about them that just work really well and really give it that depth that I was missing from the Falsion soundtrack. And there were a couple of those high notes that they tossed in every now and then with that da 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 that I really, really enjoyed. And it really just created this just wonderful experience, and it just has that depth that I was so desperately seeking in the Falsion soundtrack. So this just absolutely puts you in the mood for a really good shoot 'em up time, because this is what you open up with, and you couldn't ask for a better track to open up the game to.
So a little bit about this game and the hardware specs for it. This was the final shooter from Konami for the Famicom, and it was created specifically to push the hardware's limitations. And it utilized Konami's VRC4 chip, which was actually used in Gradius 2, which would allow for like much larger bosses, more movement of the ships, and it didn't release in America mostly because it underperformed in Japan.
Really?
Yeah, so because it underperformed in Japan, they didn't bring it over. I mean, at this time, the Super Famicom was already out.
Right. This is very, very late in the life cycle.
Right. And I mean, it doesn't help that the Super Famicom was not backwards compatible. It was initially meant to be.
Right, yep.
And then they decided it would be too expensive to manufacture the machine and include the NES components or the Famicom components.
Yeah.
So they ended up scrapping it. But
would they even have been able to bring this to America with the VRC4 chip, or is that not a chip that...
That's a good point. I don't believe the VRC4 chip is...
That's not a sound chip specifically.
I don't think so, no. Yeah. I am almost positive that the VRC4 and the VRC2 are mapper chips. And so I don't necessarily think that they have anything to do with audio. They work with things like mirror control, PRG swapping, but not necessarily audio from what I understand. So yeah, sorry, we're getting super technical.
Yeah.
But it's cool that Konami decided to continue to push the boundaries of what a Famicom game could be. And those chips really did make a difference in the creation of a lot of Konami's like most well-known games, and even some that are less known but I think are coming up more in the the present day, looking back on Konami's released titles. Obviously we spoke about Lagrange Point earlier, Akamaju Densetsu, and that's just for sound. Then you've got the other chips, like we said, the VRC2 and VRC4, really kind of pushing the limits of what the Famicom was able to do. So the composers on this one we'll talk about in a little bit, and then we'll also kind of pick Dan's brain a little bit on his experience with Crisis Force and the physics of Crisis Force. So let's get into the next pick. That's Crisis Force, the Famicom game that we're talking about right now, the 1991 release. This is Final Battle 1. Welcome back. That was Crisis Force's Final Battle 1. It's also called Boss 2, and that was off of the 1991 Famicom exclusive game that was composed by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma. I'm going to go with Dan on this one to start off. What do you think of this one?
That franticness about it is what really gets me. There's something about it that just grabs me and just puts me right into the mood to like, let's get this done.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you two feel, but that's what grabs me first and foremost and just kept me going the whole time.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know that I can compare this to the Gradius soundtrack, but there is something about the boss music getting frantic and getting into this headspace of like, oh my god, let's get this done. Like, beat this boss, don't die, and getting really kind of crazy about it that this really kind of nails. I also, for some reason, I don't know why this happened, but the very frantic instrument that's in there, it doesn't sound like a pan flute, but my head said, this sounds like a crazy pan flute solo, and that's where I went with it.
At least it wasn't a shamisen.
Not this time.
I have a little bit of a hot take. I think Falsion's boss music is way better than Crisis Force. That's how I feel. I think it's the Sawtooth bass that does it for me. But also, I don't know, this song just sounds like another boss fight, you know, like it doesn't stand out to me. You know what I mean? It's a good track. I like this track, but it's definitely like you need to focus less on the insanity of what's going on and focus more on the gameplay. It doesn't change up based on the experience. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
All right, no, that's fair.
Yeah. So Kenichi Matsubara, just to talk about the composer, one of my favorite composers, started off with Penguin Adventure in 1986, and then also did my favorite Castlevania game, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest in 87. He's labeled as Synchronism on that. I don't know why, because I believe he's the primary composer of Simon's Quest, so maybe it has something to do with the Famicom Disk System version specifically. I don't know. Followed up with some sound editing work on games like Lightning Fighters and Kitten Caboodle, and also did a game called YY World 2. Sound design on that one as well. He's done a lot of sound design on several games, but he's credited as just sound under Crisis Force. And a year later, he did Contra Force in 1992, which is also better known as Arkhound. Then he followed it up with his final game in 1994 that he was credited for, which is Poppin' Twinbee Rainbow Bell Adventures.
Poppin' Twinbee.
Yeah,
nice,
he did music on that. He's credited for like some, you know, other music that people have used of his from original works.
Right.
Now, regarding the physics of Crisis Force, Dan, tell us a little bit about what we can take from Crisis Force regarding the physics.
I think one of the fun things for me and why it was such a joy being able to go through and write articles for it on Retroware and write the book is just looking through things from a very different perspective. Like one of the things that actually stood out to me that would likely stand out to nobody else on the planet while playing this game was the way that you think about the stages and how they scroll and how quickly they scroll and how close the ships are to the surface. Like, it's close enough to be able to cast a shadow, but you think about how fast that these things would have to go in order to maintain a constant velocity moving forward like that. The speed versus how close they are, like the screen would just be flying past you at just an enormous rate, so you wouldn't be able to actually see anything. So it's kind of fun to think about those types of things as to like, how could this actually function? And I was trying to think as I was playing the game, is there an explanation for this? And really, there's not. It just wouldn't work at all. But it's really fun to think about those types of things and how some things can be done for style purposes, but there are certain games that are designed entirely around playing around with the physics and really taking a lot of care in, could this actually function in some capacity of real life, suspending some sort of disbeliefs about, like, okay, could Samus's armor suit really work, kind of thing. And just thinking about it like, okay, there could be components of this that do work in the real world, and ultimately this just simply wouldn't work. But it's a lot of fun to think about it from those types of perspectives.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, let's move into our next pick. This is Justin's pick.
This is my
your
last
last
pick.
pick.
It is.
What do you got?
Almost appropriately named, although it's not the last pick of the episode. This is the ending theme, or the ending track from Crisis Force, Famicom 1991. Welcome back. That was Ending from 1991's Crisis Force, which was a Famicom exclusive composed by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma.
I feel like this is definitely a Kenichi Matsubara track. Like, it just kind of feels and sounds very similar to the Castlevania 2 end track. It's a very somber song, and it just kind of shares a lot of the feeling and melody that song had as well for the ending of Simon's Quest. But I gotta say, there's that one sustained note that really kind of drives me crazy. It's not that the track is bad, but like, with that one sustained note towards right before the loop, it like kind of bugs me. It like kind of twerks my ears.
Twerks your ears,
Twerks my ears. Like, tweaks my ears? Tweaks my ears.
I think that might be the right word. What did you think about this one, Dan?
I think what's remarkable about this is we're so conditioned to knowing what an ending theme is like. Like, without knowing anything about this soundtrack, you know this is the end of a game.
That's
like,
true.
It just has such a tone to it, and the somber really is the right word for it, because it just puts you in this mood where it's like, oh, it's finally over, I can move on, the adventure's done. And I think it works very well. Like, I enjoyed it a lot. There's not too much to note in terms of specific instruments or anything like that. Like, I thought it was just a very nice theme to listen to and a great way to be able to close out the game.
Yeah.
Do you know how you can tell if a video game has a proper end theme? You have to be able to add in the sentence while listening to it saying, "We won, but at what cost?"
Yeah, I feel like that could be one of those things where it's just like there's an anime character and it like slowly pans over and
Right.
then there's like this shot of this like dismal blown up place or something like that.
Yeah. Or like you're walking away from some sort of explosion, not looking at it, being sure to not look at it.
So Yasuhiko Mano is the second of 3 composers in this triad. They started doing sound valuation on Snatcher in 1988. Then they did sound on Kings Valley 2 in 88, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1990. They did sound design, Space Manbo in 1990.
So the plot of Crisis Force, the game takes place in 1990X. And there's a army of robots that have invaded Tokyo. So you play as 2 twins named Asuka and Maya. And they are high school students. Their parents are apparently archaeologists. They're just 2 boring kids, apparently. But then one day, they've been having this dream, this recurring dream that ends up coming true with involving some monsters and the lost city of Atlantis that had sunk down, and these monsters had been revived 10,000 years later. So there were no weapons that would work against these monsters. So the entire world was at war with them. So Asuka and Maya's parents were caught in the attack and end up revealing the truth for who they were, who these kids were, these seemingly average kids. Their destiny was to destroy these monsters. So they have access to an aircraft that is hidden, I guess, in like a pyramid that comes from, it's something called an Aura Wing. So that's your piloted ship that you used. And when the kids were found, they were found inside of the Aura Wing. So, you know, I obviously at this point in time, they learned that they're adopted and that they were actually the kids of a warrior from a civilization called Mu, that's M-U, not M-O-O like a cow, who fought against the evil of Atlantis, or the evil that came from Atlantis 10,000 years prior.
That's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't even remember if this game's in English. I don't think it is. Dan, is this game in English?
I skipped right to the game, so I don't know.
I mean, the title screen
The menu has English,
Exactly,
but that's
yeah.
common for a lot of Japanese games. Like even like I remember when I first played the Japanese version of Metroid, and the menu was in English, and I thought like, oh, okay, not a big deal, because I got it on the Famicom Mini. I imported that.
Oh, okay.
And then once I got to the end credits, and then it was all in Japanese, I was like, oh, it is a Japanese game. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is the plot. That is the second composer. So now we'll move into our final track, which is my pick. This is from Crisis Force, our game of discussion. This is Stage 2 that we're going to be hearing from. And again by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma. Welcome back to XVGM Radio. In our final track that we just heard from Crisis Force, the Famicom exclusive, which came out in 1991, composed by Kenichi Matsubara, Yasuhiko Mano, and Jun Chuma. That track was Stage 2, also known as Land and Sea. So this one, I like the melody that kind of comes in that makes it feel like a TMNT game.
Yeah.
The part that's like that really reminds me of like Ninja Turtles. So I was feeling the TMNT love from these composers on that track. But even that like where it's got like the next slide.
Yeah.
That definitely that whole melody and lead line was just killer. Just really awesome TMNT style. Doesn't necessarily fit with this game, but
with the other tracks that we've heard.
Yeah, with the other tracks. So I don't know. Maybe this was a track that was composed as like a TMNT track, and then they just like kept it as a holdover or something to be used.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah. What do you think about it, Justin?
So I don't think I actually have much more to say about it than what you were saying, just because like we have a lot of similarities in what we like, and with this one, I think we're just on the same page. I also really like the rhythm and percussion portion of this.
Yeah.
I mean, as Dan said, like the percussion on this game or like the drums on this game are standout, and in this track particular, it's very driving. It's constantly moving, and I like the sort of feel that it gives.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Dan?
I completely agree with all of that and don't really have too much to add. I think the weirdest thing about it is that it really doesn't feel like it fits this game. It's really, really good, but it doesn't feel like it fits the kind of mood that the rest of the games set. But there's something that I almost kind of like about that when games do that, because it kind of catches you off guard. Sometimes when you have it, when everything fits that same theme and everything almost sounds like it's always from the same soundtrack, like it can almost kind of blur things together. Like that's what I like about somebody like, say, Jake Kaufman. You know, Shovel Knight, all of his tracks, like you know that's him. There's no way that the tracks that are composed by him, like you're not confused as to who did that.
Sure.
But every one of them feels very, very different for one another. So it just creates this eclectic mix that really helps in terms of just kind of re-perking your ears back up again. So even though I feel like it doesn't fit the theme, I'm glad that it's in there, and I definitely get the TMT vibes as well.
Yeah. So the final composer that we need to talk about is Jun Chuma, who has a small resume, but still, you know, pretty worthwhile to mention. Worked on Crisis Force and Contra Force, so Crisis Force being their first game in 1991, then followed it up with the Arkhound game that ended up becoming Contra Force. Formula One sensation in 93, they were sound designer. Mad Maestro, they were music production.
That's a neat little game.
Yeah. Sky Gunner in 2002, they were sound support. Chain Dive in 2003, they did sound technical support, and they were specially thanked.
Specially thanked, yeah. Thanked specially?
I don't know. And then 10,000 Bullets was their final game, where they're credited as sound in 2005.
Oh, we talked about that last episode.
We did, yeah. All right, so time to pick our favorite tracks of the episode. Now, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do Falsion and Crisis Force, or do you want to just do the whole episode?
I think the whole episode is appropriate.
Yeah.
We usually end up picking like our top two or three anyway.
Right.
So, as usual, we'll go to our guest first. Dan, what was your favorite? And if you have sub favorites or anything else, feel free to shout them out.
No, there's only one favorite, and that's Stage 4 World of Fire.
Oh, that track?
The reason I requested that track, yeah, like I had to request that Crisis Force track. Nobody was taking that from me. Like it was the absolute standout for me with both tracks. Of all of the themes in both of these that stuck in my head, this was the one. And I feel like if you have something that you're constantly humming to yourself, that says a lot about that track.
So I agree with Dan. That Stage 4 World of Fire track was on fire as far as I'm concerned. I mean, all jokes aside, it was really cool. I will also say that the Stage 6 track from Falsion that you and I seemed to request from the future.
Yes.
I guess I understand why. That was a really, really cool track as well. Overall, I think Crisis Force comes out on top in the music department over Falsion.
I am torn because I did not hear Stage 4 or don't remember Stage 4, but I loved Dan's pick. I thought it was great, but it is not my favorite.
No?
No, I would say it's probably...
What?
Yeah, I would say it's probably third. I thought it was really good. I can't remember anything from it. I know I liked it, but it didn't stick in my head. So the two that stuck in my head the most were Justin's pick, Crisis Force Stage 1 and 6, Advanced City, probably because I've played it that stage over and over multiple times.
Right.
I'm also going to say the Falsion boss theme.
I thought you were going to go with that. I
That
actually thought that
one-
was going to be your top.
Yeah, that one I loved. I thought that was really good. And that one I definitely had stuck in my head after I heard it.
Yeah.
And it kind of was the thing that made me want to do this episode. So,
That's fair.
yeah. But definitely Crisis Force, that first track, Stage 1 and 6, is just absolutely killer.
Cool.
Yeah, totally awesome. So we'd like to thank Dan Laughton for not only suggesting a track, but also
Coming on the episode.
We appreciate it. We'd like to give you the floor and tell us what you're working on and tell us, where we can find your book and, whatever else you want to say.
My wife and I just started a podcast called the Village Persons Podcast, which is a podcast just about parenting. And we're doing quick, 30-minute episodes each month, just talking about some random ideas about what we didn't think about in terms of getting into parenting and some things that we were vehement about and totally became lax with as we started going along, and just fun parts and complicated parts about this whole parenting journey. And so we set up a website and got that going. We just recorded our third episode, so that can be found at the villagepersonspodcast.com. And that also has links for my book, and from that there's a subset to find the retroware articles that I wrote before and all sorts of things. So anything that I've done should be able to be found from that section of the website.
Cool. Well, it's great to have you on, and we'd love to bring you back in the future, talk about more shmuppity goodness or something else in your wheelhouse.
Sounds good. I would love to be back on.
Awesome.
Cool. So, we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Alex Messenger, Scott McElhone, Cam Worma, Chris Hart, Dan Laughton, Chris Murray, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Jordan and Anson Davis, Chris Myers, Llama Adam, Jeremy Rutz, Peter Panda, Bedroth, Nick Davis, Matthew Hanola, Brad Austin, Mixmaster, and the Autistic Gamer 89. If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/XVGM Radio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
And if you'd like what you've heard, please consider giving us a rating on iTunes and a review.
You can also join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at www.facebook.com/groups/XVGM Radio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks, or just talking about the podcast itself.
And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle for both of those sites is @XVGM Radio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
So in 2 weeks, Justin, we are coming up on episode 48, and it's also going to be, April 1st? April Fool's Day. Now, we are not going to be clowning around because we are featuring a band
And a game.
and a game. And the band that we're featuring is Knights of the Round.
Yes.
We're going to be talking to members of Knights of the Round.
This is, of course, based on the SNES game of the same name.
No.
No, obviously, if you know anything about the dates, this is based on the summon from the game that is being remade to much acclaim and praise, Final Fantasy VII. So we are going to be talking a lot about that.
Yes, we're going to dive headfirst into the world of Final Fantasy VII. Both of us, it's one of our favorite games of all time.
Yep.
Probably my favorite RPG of all time, maybe second favorite next to Chrono Trigger, but Yeah, so we're going to be talking about that game. It's a wonderful soundtrack. It's going to be very hard to pick only a certain number of tracks, but the guys from Ninth Round are going to help us out with chatting about it. So it's going to be fun.
Yes, it'll be a good time.
Yeah. So this is Mike
And Justin.
signing off from XVGM Radio.
What you both were saying earlier with like lacking that saw table or sawtooth, the saw table, lacking the saw
Wrong
table.
field entirely, Justin.
Tweaks my ears? Tweaks my ears.
I think that might be the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think your ears twerk.
I mean, if they do, I'd love to see it and then put it on the internet and maybe make money off of it.
Oh, there we go. Got to get that Taco Bell money
Yeah,
somehow.
make a TikTok video or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Mike twerking.
Yeah.
Mike ear twerking.
Ear twerking, yes.
Sure. So from the Crisis Core 1991 Famicom game, I want to
Crisis
play.
Core?
God, I keep doing that. Sorry, we're so close to the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's just no.
It's in your brain.
I see Crisis. I see two words, and the first word is Crisis. For some reason, I just
Crisis Core. Yeah, I hear you.